Welcome, welcome, welcome to Coping in Color, Navigating Black Mental Health, brought to you by Black Mental Health Canada, where we have conversations, where we do get to demystify mental health, particularly in the Black community. And with me today, just waiting for Dr. Tandy to come on. Uh, I do have Dr. Tandine Poker, and I would very much love to read your bio, which was lovely. But I got caught by a number of things. And before I got to you, I want to introduce myself. My name's Miriam Sekandi. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I am a consultant, and I'm also an educator. I'm a trained teacher. And right now, I am a lecturer at the University of Alberta. So, based in Edmonton, Alberta. And I'm glad to meet you, my fellow sister here in Alberta, Calgary, a snow throw away from Edmonton. And I'm excited for the conversation we are going to have. And I hope, at the end of the day, there's a lot to take away because your journeys, when I read your bio, I saw journeys. I just saw threads of journeys going through there. And I was like, oh, I'm so interested in these journeys. So I would love to know. So our listeners would love to know. And, everyone who gets to watch this would love to know, who is Tandy? Who is she? What's that journey that took her from Malawi to Canada? How's the journey been? What's that been like for you?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you and to chat about my story. Like I really welcome the platform and welcome the opportunity to do so. So, what's the journey been like? It's been a roller coaster, but then that's everybody's life to some extent. Everybody has stories and threads of who they are to share.
Mhm. Talk about roller coaster. I see
Yeah.
Malawi. I see Malaysia. I see Canada. I don't know what else is in between there, but as you went through that roller coaster, what took you on that
Yeah.
journey? How did you end up on that journey?
Okay, so like we can start a bit about
Yeah.
my background, I guess. So, like you kindly said, and in my bio, I was originally born in Malawi. My family is from Malawi, and for those of you who don't know, Malawi is a small country in Southeast Africa, bordered by Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. So beautiful, beautiful country. However, I'm the firstborn. I should also mention that. So. Um, when I was a baby, though, my parents left Malawi and they lived in South Africa for a time, but then they moved to the United States. So I moved to the United States with my family when I was maybe like 9 months or just over a year. So I lived in Lansing, Michigan, and I lived there for about the first 10 years of my life. So I had a very North American upbringing, a lot of my values, even though, as we, grow up in an African household, I'm sure a lot of people can relate with having that first generation immigrant experience. You hear the stories about where your parents and stuff come from, right? So yeah, I lived in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan for the first 10 years of my life. It was a pretty normal childhood, I would say. And everything changed when my family decided to move to
Okay.
South Africa. So we moved to Johannesburg um, around, yeah, I was about 10 years old, and my dad got a job there. So I lived in South Africa for a year, and that was my first time in my conscious memory, first of all, leaving the States, but then also experiencing Africa and experiencing the African school system, which was very different from everything that I'd known before. So that was very, you're meeting so many different people. I grew up a lot
Yeah.
in that year, I would say. Um, it was an amazing experience. There were a lot of things that happened in terms of my mental health as well. But the journey didn't end there. The journey continued when my family moved to the UK. So I lived in Manchester with my family for another like 9 years or so. So I went to secondary school, or what we call high school, right? In the UK. And I got to experience then the British education system and British society. And things are very different there. There are common similarities to like, North America, Canada, and, the States. But then there are also a lot of differences in terms of European culture and stuff. And so up until that point, experiencing and having to cope and adapt in all these different environments just kind of, when you're trying to cope and adapt while
Mm,
growing up, we
mm,
also forget that. So there's an element of self identity. I was still figuring myself out until for a long, long time. I didn't, you have to like, I think a lot of Black people, or a lot of people in general, can relate to that idea of having to put on a mask or just having to fit in to communities. But then if you're not careful, you can lose who you
mm,
actually are in that journey. So I was in the UK, in Manchester for a while. Then I decided to go to university. I really could have gone anywhere in the world. So initially started actually with, I studied biomedical sciences in Wales in the UK. And it was such a beautiful experience. However, it was my first time living away from home. And even though it was an amazing experience, I learned a lot. I started to notice certain things about the education system. And I started to really think to myself, what is it that I really wanted? Because I did not want to be a scientist, even though I was studying biomedical sciences. It had always been my dream to be a medical doctor. And so I was kind of like, why aren't I going for it now? Like, what is stopping me from actually making that a reality today? So I uprooted everything I'd ever known. I packed everything I had and that was important to me in 2 suitcases, and I left. And I left and I moved to Malaysia. And that's where I started and completed my medical school journey, during which, and I was completely alone there, during which my parents moved, or my family moved, I should say, to Canada, and they settled in Calgary and are very happy here. I'm now in Calgary too, since completing my medical degree. So I have quite a bit of travel experience, but I wouldn't trade it for anything really. I got to see the good and the bad of so many different places in society that you kind of stop romanticizing a lot of things. And I think it's really important that, especially we as Black people, we will see things on social media. You see people traveling there, doing that, doing this. And it's not all roses, not all that glitters is gold. So that's like my life travel story in a nutshell. I'm currently based in Calgary, Alberta, though.
thank
So
you. Thank you for
yeah.
that. So I'm thinking you raised something really important about how, traveling while at the same time growing. And many
Mm,
times we don't
mm.
realize, especially for young people, that they're in a stage of identity formation at the same time. As parents, we make the decisions to travel, and as we move
Mm.
them along, it does affect them.
Oh,
So
100%.
somehow,
100%.
somewhere, how was your mental health during that period? Like, what was going on for you mentally, and how did you cope?
Mm. Well, so like at the crux of it, there is obviously feeling like the odd one out. And I think that's something that people can relate to no matter what your background is. But definitely, if you've moved school, let alone moved country, you feel quite isolated. So there was a lot of loneliness, I would say, especially as I got into my teen years. There's a lot of loneliness, there was a lot of anxiety. And I dealt with depression for a lot of my teen years, actually, because there was this essence of keeping things inside. There was an essence of there was nobody you could trust. I think, like you mentioned, adults drag, let me not say drag, but adults make these decisions for you, and you're kind of left to deal with the consequences. And when you are under 18, even over 18, I'd say, but when you're definitely a child or a teen, you don't have the tools to cope with it. You don't know how to to express what's going on inside. And then when you couple it with cultural expectations and the pressures of whatever culture you come from. So, like I said, I come from Malawi, which is quite traditionally African. So, high standards, good reputation, pressure to succeed. That combined with, you're having to adapt to new
Mhm.
education systems. What used to work for me in America did not work for me in South Africa. And then what used to work for me in South Africa as a good student did not work for me in the UK. So then that constant adaptation really it took its toll. I think I would say it started to manifest initially with perfectionism, especially in my early academic career, high school, whatever, perfectionism, which I have come to realize is a form of anxiety. It's a form of control. You know, you start to believe the stories that, the external stories that are being told to you, like if you don't get good grades, your life will be a mess, right? And you start to internalize it and think that when your grade drops below a certain thing, a certain level, you start to say, I am the problem. I am this. So I have, and, so then there comes these elements of shame and embarrassment and guilt and overworking yourself. So I definitely experienced that, especially in high school. And as obviously my academic career went on, things get harder, and you are not the smartest person in the class. And people on the outside have a lot of expectations and pressure on you. So it was a lot to deal with growing up. And it really manifests as anxiety and depression for years until I I learned I literally taught myself and learned how to cope and how to come out of it and how to live with myself. So I redefined
Mm.
everything after that.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's really, really beautiful. I love stories of
Like,
overcoming. I struggle with the word resilience because resilience is like
same.
going back, but
Right?
sometimes you're not going
Mm.
back. You just have to find those different ways to cope, right? Which is
Yeah.
what we are
Yeah.
talking about here. Now, here you are,
Yeah.
you experienced that, and
Mm.
now you're aspiring to go into family medicine. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm curious about, armed with this personal experience, personal story of overcome, not even overcoming, but encountering this experience at the hands of which you did not make the decisions that were made for you by your parents, said to move. You didn't have control over that.
Mm.
So, armed
Mm.
with that knowledge within your body and within your mind, I'm wondering how you're going to bring that into family medicine, particularly for Black patients and
Mhm.
particularly in regards to Black mental health.
Yeah. So I think one important, I guess, lesson or theme that I really learned on my journey, especially, is that a lot of the times, and especially as Black people, we are in circumstances, external circumstances that we cannot change. You cannot change, whether it be you can't leave the country, da 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 da, visa, da da da. Um, Even if you're stuck in a degree you don't like, that might be a circumstance you cannot change, or you're stuck in school or whatever. But what you can change is the inside, your mindset, your internal landscape is what we refer to. And um I would wish to share with more people how important cultivating your internal landscape is. So for me, like I said, I dealt with anxiety and depression and whatnot as I was growing up. But what really helped me to just live through it and be where I am today was reading. I found my way out through coping with words, reading and writing. I used to journal a lot. I used to make up stories. And reading was one of those things that it's free. It's free to do. You don't need electricity. You don't need a lot of things. You could just grab a book and you could be in somebody else's world. And that's when I fell in love with people's stories. And I found a lot of strength and inspiration from people's, from people's stories. You could read a book about somebody going through divorce, and then you realize that actually you put into perspective your own problems and you say, actually, if that person can go through it, even if it's a fictional story, I maybe can, or I can find or figure out the ways to
Mhm.
do so. So, going into family medicine practice, I'm still, like I said, I'd always wanted to be a doctor, but I've really honed into family medicine because I believe in people and I believe in that primary health care being the first line of defense. Hearing people's stories and equipping them with the tools to actually improve their lives, even if it's just the internal landscape for now, So I'd like to use my words, at least, and the knowledge that I do have, to be it inspire people, tell people, have you thought about thinking like this? Or or even if it's just counseling, have you thought about, tackling this problem like this? And then,
Mhm.
giving hope, because that's the other thing that a lot of people struggle with when you're trying to figure all of these things out. It can be very overwhelming. But just a simple conversation with a person who wants to listen and wants to hear your story, I think can be so transformative because it transformed my life, and going into practice, that's what I'd like to do for my patients. Yeah.
Nice. Lovely. I
Yeah.
have 101 questions here. But before I go
Go
to
ahead,
one,
sis.
which I would love to ask right away, I'm just curious, when you think about other
Mm.
doctors or other medical personnel, do you feel like they really understand Black mental health? And if they don't, what
Mhm.
what words of wisdom or what ways would you see yourself helping these individuals to and find ways of understanding Black mental health, or what role will you play,
Mm.
when you finally there?
Mm. So, this exact, question, this concept really came into sharp focus for me when I was studying in Malaysia. Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia, for those of you who don't know, and there are not a lot of Black people, let's say that. And the Black people that are there are usually students. So for a lot of the local population, you are the first time they're meeting a Black person, even in healthcare fields. And that often meant that your need not even just your needs are not being catered to. A lot of the times it meant that people had a lot of preconceived conceptions about who you are, what you're meant to be. Um, a lot of stereotypes exist, and that exists everywhere in society, and including and especially the healthcare field. A lot of healthcare professionals, unfortunately, especially even the ones that I've learned under, even though they have a breadth of experience and knowledge that is really useful, actual interactions with people from other cultures was lacking, and it often led to harmful situations, really dangerous and hurtful things being said, either as a as the professional in the situation, or between teacher and student. I had a lot of medical doctor lecturers and teachers who would insult people based on the country that they're from, you know and so, right, so that doesn't really happen here in Canada, I'm assuming. I'd like to think not, but even so, what would I say to other healthcare professionals? Treat people like people. Be interested, be curious. I think that's another thing to emphasize. There In healthcare, I feel like us as professionals tend to lack a sense of empathy, actually. We lack actual empathy. We're good at performing it at the physical gestures of pretending that we listen and pretending that, healthcare professionals care, but actually being curious and actually wanting to learn about the Black experience from Black people themselves. And that's usually through stories, that's through music, that's through culture, that's through, even if you don't go into a whole deep dive, I would love to see more healthcare professionals be empathetic and actually care about the people that the demographics that they're dealing with, because healthcare and medicine, especially, even though, yes, I am a doctor, it does not exist in isolation. You have social factors that influence people every day, financial factors that influence people every day. Whilst you yourself, as a professional, might not be an immigrant, you might not have ever left your hometown or whatever, reading a book about somebody's life, at least just one, would change completely the advice you even give, the kinds of medications you even give. So that's, a long-winded way, like, answer. But yeah, I'd like to see more empathy in our profession, and I'd like to encourage, first of all, amplify Black voices, or amplify stories that need to be told. Another thing that I realized on my journeys, there are so many stories, especially from Africans, especially from immigrants, that are not being told. And they influence so much, but here we are, we're not letting them be heard. And once they're heard, they have a power to transform people's mindsets about people. So
Interesting. Again,
yeah.
you brought out 1,000 questions for me. I,
We can talk.
I know
Okay.
you raised something very interesting, which is curiosity. I'm a teacher, and for me,
Mm,
curiosity is very important because that's how we learn,
mm,
And a
yeah.
lot of times, the work that we do, when we do it over and over, like the doctors and nurses, I'm assuming that they probably do
Mm,
experience compassion fatigue, right? And
yes, definitely.
eventually they become numb. I'm just speaking for them, but I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe that's where the disconnect comes from. I don't know. So
Mm,
curiosity helps to get rid of that because if you
mm,
encounter that another person as somebody new, maybe.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what what advice would you have? Or before I go to the advice, we can do that after, our upcoming break. But maybe let's talk about representation. You're a black,
Mm, mm,
should I say woman? You're a black
yeah.
woman
Yeah.
who's going to be, representing us, or who's already representing us in the medical field, right? Um,
Mm,
how do you see that as playing a role in improving Black mental health or giving people hope? When people see someone who looks like them in a field, see
mm.
representation.
Oof, representation is so important. Representation is so important. But it is just the starting point, right? Once you see somebody like you doing something, you I would hope that when people see me doing anything that I do, they are inspired to know that they too can be
Mhm.
set free. So for a long time, my motto or philosophy was inspiring authenticity, because I felt, especially with the whole identity thing and moving around and all these expectations, I had so many people telling me who I was supposed to be. And I had so many, especially so many people telling me that, you can't do XYZ because you're Black. And if you do it, even in a good way, when people would say, "Oh no, don't like play that sport because Black people play that sport," and you don't want to be perceived as, there's like that element of wanting or being pressured to perform so that you are successful in what is, successful in mostly white societies, right? It was important for me to just be myself and learn how to be myself so that people can know that it's okay to be yourself. A big element that I learned over this journey was, especially with the overt racism that can be present in healthcare and in certain countries, the world is not this meritocracy that we're taught as kids. Even if you are the best behaved and you're the best behaved and you do all these things and you treat everyone with kindness, there are still some people who are going to treat you terribly because the way you, and that's why it is so important, number one, that we have representatives, role models who are doing big and amazing things. But it's also important that we have role models that are just being themselves and doing their own thing. And that's what I've always strived to do. So I shared my whole medical school journey very publicly on my Instagram and my YouTube page. And a lot of people would message me privately and say like, the way that you're honest about being tired of studying or the this or that really helps heal me. It's a reflection. It helped me feel like I don't have to always perform, and even now going into it, I'm okay with being representative, but I'd also like people to know that it's not about being the best or being, getting all the awards to prove. You have to ask yourself, what are you trying to prove, and to who? At the end of the day, it has to be about doing the things for you, and taking care of you so that you can take care of your community as well. So I think it's really important for me that I am in the spaces that I'm in, and I move with confidence. But I move with that confidence from knowing that I'm just myself, and I will always be myself, whether you like it or not. I'm also learning. I'm also on a growth journey, and I'm humble enough to admit it. I'm like, if you have something to teach me, teach me. But that's life. We're here for a blink of an eye, and then, so we might as well as appreciate all the different people and all the different types of, experiences that are out there. So that's what I'd like to represent, being your authentic self, in a professional and a personal capacity. Yeah.
Lovely. I love the concept of, not just seeing people in a field, but seeing people actually
Mm.
be themselves. Then,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that's helping others get out of their boxes, or the boxes that the world has created for them, and tell them that they
Yeah.
should be, you know? And, that
Right.
that creates a lot of anxiety for people and
Pressure.
unnecessary pressure, because sometimes they may not live up
Yeah.
to it, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, on the flip side, after this upcoming break, I there are a few community-based questions that I would love to ask you, and we'll see,
Yeah, sure.
how you've been able to navigate those, especially in the work that you're doing now with your volunteering and so on. And I'm looking forward to hearing that. So we'll go on a break, and we'll be right back.
That is serious.
And we a nice little bio break, but we are back with the lovely Dr. Tandine Foka, a recent medical graduate from Masa University in Malaysia. She's an international award-winning public speaker and educator, and has won tons of speaking championships. But before I go there, because I want to hear that piece too, before I go there, like when you spoke, something that kept creeping in my mind was, we are talking here, you and I, and making things seem simple. But there's a lot of stigma in our Black community around mental health. It is not it's at right now, 2023, 2024, and probably post COVID, we've started talking more about it and bringing it to the forefront. And in your work as a volunteer, I know you're doing a lot of volunteer work in Calgary. What are you seeing around stigma within the Black community? And also, how do you think we need to address this big monster called stigma against mental health in the Black community? Oh, you are muted, I believe.
There we go. Nice. Thank you. Yeah, so it's a big thing, mental health in the Black community, especially in those who come from, immigrant backgrounds. There's often an element of you should
Mm.
just be grateful to be where you are at. And whilst gratitude is very important in maintaining good, um, mental well-being, I think that we often deal with a root problem of shame and embarrassment in our communities, especially in Black communities. People go through things and are afraid to talk about them because they're afraid of what people will say about reputation, about um, the what will people think about me? It'll change, and we have to start asking ourselves these questions of, well, is it a bad thing if somebody doesn't perceive me like that anymore? Is it a bad thing? Is it a bad thing if people know that you aren't perfect all the time, that you do struggle with things, and is it, like you said earlier, we make it very simple. It's so easy for me to come up here and say I dealt with XYZ and now I'm done. But I really, really encourage people to stop thinking of your well-being in general, even physical health, as this static thing that is either good or bad. Think of it more as a spectrum. Some days it's more on this end, some days it's more on this end, things that can influence it. And again, it's also a thing I try and encourage my patients and people I talk to is to be curious about yourself. What are the things that push me towards this end of the spectrum and this end of the spectrum? What are the things that influence my mood and make it better or worse? But I think a lot of times in our community, we are taught that
Mm.
it is selfish to think about yourself. And that is one of the most damaging, root beliefs, because how can you give to your community if you have nothing to give? Do you understand? Like, I think we really need to start talking about this idea of, you give from a flowing cup. Your cup runs over. You give love because you're so full of it yourself. So in our community, we have a lot of issues with shame. A lot of people stay in really harmful situations to save face, and I'd like you know to demystify that. I'd really like people, again, so it goes back to like the storytelling thing. People, when they share their stories, realize that they're not alone in certain situations, even when they do bad things. So that's another thing in our community. I'd say we deal with really strong moral concepts. Things are either evil or good, and there's no in between. And actually, in life, there's a lot of in between. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of nuance. We need to learn the empathy, the emotional intelligence, skills on like critical thinking to be able to handle that and say, yeah, okay, I did that thing before, but I can grow. I can change. Things can be different for ourselves, and they don't have to be hidden as well. You don't have to deal with everything alone. There are people who've gone through the same things and are ready to help you, but only if you share. So that's like one of my main missions of going into mental health research, etc., that I'd like to bring to my patients, really, and my
Mm.
friends, my family, my communities. Yeah.
Again, yeah, it's
That's a
taking me
lot, I
back
know.
because the saving face piece, we are trying to save face, and at the same time we are in community. And sometimes you find our community
Mm,
is who charges us. We say we need community to charge us,
hmm.
but at the same time, community
Yeah.
is who drains us. So how do we find that
Yeah,
balance?
sometimes, yeah. Yeah, right. So, like, I am a big advocate as well. Well, like you said, it's about balance. I'm a big advocate for people
Mhm.
learning how to be alone as well. And learning why is this important, how to be alone, because you really get to the crux of who you are in the absence of all the other social roles that you play in society, the absence of being sister, mother, student, doctor, this, you, who are you when nobody is watching? And I feel like a lot of people in our community are, number one, not given the opportunity, to just have time alone, to just be themselves. But where possible, especially here in the West, a little bit of time every day to really like get to know yourself really can, and not just get to know yourself, learn how to not be lonely in that, and learn how to, what are the things that you, I like to ask my patients to sit back and like really think, what are the things that you're waiting for the external world or other people to fill in your life, and what are the things that you can actually fill for
Mm.
yourself, and then what is left over, then sure, you bring it to the community. But that's kind of why, you need to have a strong, or to try and develop a strong sense of self identity, so that when you're going into the community, even if you do experience something toxic that somebody said, you can recognize that that is not a reflection of you. You have that like little bit of a distance to say, actually, you can recognize what is harmful and what is beneficial,
Mm.
because I don't think any community is ever perfect, but striking that balance of knowing who you are and then understanding what you bring to your community can really, really help. Yeah. And it's not selfish to do so. I think another thing is that people think that you have to hide away and you're isolating and you're hiding. And it's like, no, not necessarily. There's time for both. There's time to be with people, and then there's time to be alone. And
Nice.
that's okay.
Being comfortable in
Yeah.
being alone without feeling lonely. Really, really
Mm.
powerful. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Uh, I'm gonna take you back a little bit to where we started. With you, I'm a person
Sure.
who's really interested in young people. I think we really, because young
Mm.
people don't normally make their own decisions. It's parents who make decisions for their young people, right? Most times. If they are person themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Go to the
Yeah.
other
Makes
side.
sense.
How,
Mm.
what advice would you give to parents in supporting their children's mental health?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a big one. Um, yeah, no, that's a big one. That's even I think in my own experiences. Just because on one hand, you understand, and especially now at this point, I'm not a parent myself yet, but I'm old enough to recognize the decisions that my parents made on my behalf that were for the good, that they were doing the best with the resources and the information that they had at the time. But just because you think you're doing the
Mhm.
best doesn't mean that it's the best for your child. That's an important thing to consider, and you have to. I, especially in our community, one big piece of advice I'd give is to stop treating
Mm.
your children as extensions of yourself, to stop treating them as extensions of yourself, because they are not. They are these whole individual beings with a whole consciousness, whole set of morality. And as much as you can try and control and influence and teach or guidance, they are themselves, and they have their own wants, needs, dreams, etc. And the best thing that you can do for their mental health is to uh, foster a safe
Mhm.
space to discuss things. That's the main thing. Foster an environment where even if you don't agree, they can still talk to you and come to you, even if it's not with everything, but they can still come and know that I am not going to be shamed and embarrassed and judged by this person who says that they love me. And the reason why I say that this is so important is because your family is the first place that you're getting. First of all, it's the first place you're getting a lot of these internal messages. The things your family told you are the things, when I think about my own journey, the things I was told were the things I internalized and believed for decades. And a lot of them I had to undo. Some people never undo the damage that is done when, you know, when something is brought up, whether it be their weight, their skin tone, etc., right? Some people never outgrow those callings that are given. But it's also, you know, your family and parents really do shape the kind of love you learn to accept. And I feel like this is such a big this is such a big topic that would need even more time. But like, if you see the amount of people in our community that end up going into abusive and toxic situations and relationships, there's a direct correlation with every story I've known. There's a direct correlation with how they were treated growing up and the things that were said growing up. If you grew up in a family where no one told you I love you, you'll accept the first person who tells you I love you, no matter what they do to you, because your inner child is still yearning for those things. And I feel like as Africans as well, in our community, we always say it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to raise your inner child too. So having, you know, not just your parents, but encourage your children not to keep things in because you'll ruin the reputation of the family, but to talk to people, because it does take a village to raise that child's self-esteem, to raise that child's confidence. And as parents, I'm like, get your child involved in the community, and also, but get them out there, but give them a safe place to come back as well. Yeah, that's my biggest advice. Because it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Once they get out into the world, they will seek everything you didn't give them. You know? So, and you know, I've seen so many people who didn't recover from that journey of seeking love in the wrong
So parents who
places.
are listening
So,
to us need
you know,
to realize that providing that safe haven for their kids, knowing that when they go out, you know, are they seeking or are they just tapping in and coming back to their safe haven? Lovely, lovely, lovely.
yeah,
Now I would
yeah.
love to turn to your tea with Tandy. What's tea with Tandy? Tell us more about tea with Tandy.
So, So, um, Thandi is my platform right now. It's still pretty new, but whilst I say it's pretty new, I'm on Instagram and TikTok. For those of you who are watching, it's been a long time in the coming, I should say. I essentially have always been this person who liked talking to interesting people. I like meeting people, and like I said, I like sharing people's stories. I love learning from people's stories. And there are so many stories that are just not amplified. And that is what I aim to do on my platform. Not so much in a podcast, but in a variety of different ways. I'd like to share as much as I can with my audience, as well as just the tools that people can actually use to get to where they want to be. I feel great responsibility as a healthcare professional and as somebody who loves to read and learn. That I'm learning and I'm gaining all of this stuff and this knowledge, and I'm like, wow, now I feel I'm at a place where I deal with things way better than I used to. But then I have friends who don't and are in situations I've been before. And it was very natural for me to help them out or to give information or to share resources or to say, hey, I read this book. It was really, really interesting. It really helped me dealing with XYZ. And now I just want to do that to a greater audience. And like I said, through my journey in medical school, I also learned that I love teaching and I love educating. And even though I'm very early in my career and all of that, I'm like, I feel like it shouldn't be a thing I wait until I'm 40, 50, 60 to start doing. Why can't I start with the people that I know now? Why can't I start building community and sharing? In fact, I feel like it can be more powerful when I'm talking to people my age and I'm like, girl, I was there too, but I did this. Maybe try, you know, or just get support or listen. It can be more encouraging. So that's my platform. It's a free space for people to DM me, talk, and have discussions. about anything under the sun, but especially about things that pertain to identity and like I said, your story and getting yourself to heal and to grow and, be your authentic self. So that's what my platform is
Lovely.
about at the
So,
moment.
tea with
So do follow,
Tandy, check it
guys.
out. Tea with Tandy.
Easy.
Tandy is Thandi. So excited to, I'll be looking it up and I will
Yeah,
follow.
please do,
I
guys. Please
wanna
spill the tea.
take some of that tea. So, uh,
Please.
okay, yes, in the chat, let's look. So the question is, how can young Canadians, thank you, Marcia, how can young immigrant Canadians reconcile their desire to pursue their own goals and dreams without compromising their cultural values and expectations?
Girl, well, first of all, like, I'm there. I'm there with you, I should say. Like, as in, even though I have, finished medical school, every African parent's dream, there's still expectations on me, Every people, I still have aunties asking, now when are you getting married? And people making these assumptions about my future. And so, first of all, girl, I understand. I think it's so one point, it's really important to not shame yourself or not quell your desires down. You are your own person, and you have to remember that. You have to remember that you always, at the end of the day, you are the one
Mm,
person you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. Wherever you go, whatever you're doing. So you got to make sure that whatever decisions you're making are not decisions that you're going to regret. I understand that it can be very difficult to get out of certain situations, and then it breeds a lot of resentment. I don't have all the answers when it comes to dealing with the resentment you might feel towards the people who push you down certain paths. But what I can say is that it's still your life, and there are ways to make decisions based on your desires and your dreams. Um, but also still respectfully. It doesn't have to be a whole, and this is where I think that mental health differs from that of the general population, especially in Black communities. It doesn't have to be, I cut my parents off and, I moved to this place and I did my own thing. Whilst that might be the answer for some people, there are sometimes ways to I don't want to say compromise, but you can find a way of pursuing your desires, but not um damaging too much. There will be damage. I think I should also like mention that. Another point I'd say, like, when you're living your authentic self, it is almost inevitable that you're going to meet different people that don't agree, and because of that disagreement they don't like you or they don't see you in the same way. I think us as children, or us as people, we often are afraid of disappointment. We're afraid of disappointing others. We're afraid of embarrassing ourselves. Now now you're, if you declare to, for example, you declare to your community, I want to do this thing. Everybody's laughing at you. Now there's that fear and that pressure that, oh my God, what if I don't succeed? But those are the things that you kind of have to breathe. I think like one of the like tools that really helps me is like that mindfulness. Mindfulness. Really breathe and understand yourself and say, hey, you know, it is literally affirmations, but it's a conversation between yourself and say, I know who I am in this regard. I trust my intuition, and even as long as you approach it, I'd say, in the most respectful way that you can, but still are firm. So set boundaries and find peace. That book is such a good book in terms of,
all right.
actually learning some skills to say, I have to be firm in what I think and believe, but at the same time I can be respectful. And if they don't vibe with that still, then at the end of the day that you did the best you could in that situation. You explained clearly and calmly, this is what I want to do. And yeah, okay, our community can be dramatic when you decide to do something different. But again, that's where that mindfulness and being present and being calm in yourself and saying, I'm going to trust my intuition and go for the thing that makes me, even now, like I said, Marcia, feel free to reach out to me if you still want to talk about it. But like, even now, everybody has this expectation. I've graduated, supposed to be making millions. Why am I not a cardiothoracic surgeon already? You know, and like, actually, I'm here taking a whole year out so I could just experiment as an educator and experiment as different things and get myself together. And it doesn't matter if other people don't like it or don't approve of it, because again, you're the only person you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. So make sure you have to really get comfortable with making decisions that other people don't agree with. That was one piece of advice somebody gave me. My grandpa actually gave me in my first year of medical school. He was like, get very comfortable with making decisions people don't understand. And it's really set me free after that, because their reaction is not it's not for you to manage. But yeah, hope that answered your
And I
question,
think, you know,
Marcia.
I also get a lot of this question too, because I teach parenting as well. And what is interesting is it's like putting food in
Yeah.
hot water and not expecting the food to turn hot. So if you bring a
You know
young
what I
child to
mean? Yeah,
Canada,
yeah.
they cannot, there's no way they are going to not change. Things are going to change. The change is going to be there. But and then a lot of pressure is put on the young person to pursue their goals and dreams without compromising their culture. But there is no pressure put on parents to understand that this child is in a new environment. The child is cold, being put in hot water, and they're eventually going to get cooked. And food is going to be look different. So there will be
Yeah.
changes. And I think that's the piece that we all have
Yeah.
to kind of live with.
Well, that's
Right?
my thing. Change doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I wish we would show, I think even in the way that you show to your family, you
Yeah.
show them that actually I can live my life
And there is
differently,
this
but it
idea
doesn't
that
have to be a terrible thing.
that the Canadian culture is bad. It makes it look like the Canadian culture is bad. So if a child picks up things from there,
Mm-hmm.
bad. But we need to also look at them differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But as we kind of get towards the end of this, I'm going to ask you a question. You're 90 years old.
Sure, go ahead.
You're laying down on your little mat with a smile on your face and thinking, wow, what a life. What is that life for you
Yeah.
when you look back from the age of 90?
Honestly, for me, that life, on a basic level, that life looks like I have followed my intuition where it took me. I had the courage to do things that scared me. I wouldn't be here today, even in Canada, had I not had the courage to do things that inspired me. I have I have given back. I would love to know at the end of my days that I don't regret much, that I tried the things, even when it was embarrassing, even when I flopped and I fell flat on my face, I still got up because that was life. I really want to feel like I've lived, and I really want to know that I have left behind sustainable systems that go on to help and inspire and to educate, to teach, to make sure that people who were in my position are a little bit better off because of something I did, be it a book I wrote in the future, be it, you know, a school I opened, but be it something I did, one little thing. I'd like somebody to feel a little bit better about who they are and feel a little more comfortable and confident in their story. And um I just want to know that I ate all the food, I danced all the dances, I experienced the joy, I really like tasted and experienced life, and then I also shared it with the people around me, and I brought people in We enjoyed, we had community, we had life. I'd like to live at 90, I'd like to look back and be like, yeah,
Love it.
we did that, and nobody can take that away from me. I know what I did, and I know that I enjoyed it. That's what
Nice.
I want,
Love
the
it.
satisfaction.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. And a couple of final tips for our listeners. One tip.
Ooh, okay. Well, if I was to give one tip from my journey is that you gotta start where you are at. Meet yourself where you are at. What does that mean? You're not going to solve your problems just by going outside to therapy or just by doing, you know, there are so many things you can start with today to improve your mental well-being as well as your physical and general life circumstances. So meet yourself where you're at. Have the acceptance to experiment. Accept yourself where you're at. Say, yeah, I am dealing with XYZ, and then be okay with learning, be okay with experimenting. Nearly everything that I've learned so far was through trial and error. I said, hey, I did that, my mental health suffered, but when I did that, that worked for me, and being okay with that, that's for me. So starting where you're at, with the resources you have, where you're at, you'd be so surprised how much you have at your fingertips. Like I said, back before the internet, no, none of that old, but like I was reading books. But if we have YouTube now to help yourself on your self-education journey. But there's a lot of learning that needs to be done. So start where you're at, meet yourself where you're at, and then grow from there.
Thank you so much for
That's my
joining
main
us.
advice.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us to listen to the lovely Dr. Tandine Poker. I've been your host, Miriam Sekandi, and
Nice.
we're here coping in color with Black Mental Health Canada. Thank you.
Thank you.